Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
Early morning edition of the Can't Wait podcast. If you're joining the stream, it is just after 9 a.m. on the East Coast. Me and Zach are busy people, apparently, and we're squeezing this one in early on a Friday. So if you are here and joining us live, thank you so much for getting up early. Hopefully you have some coffee brewing. Zach, I don't see that you have coffee in front of you. Mine is
I already had my
brewing,
coffee.
So, oh, wow. All right.
I was gonna say we have an early morning routine around here because I drive Samantha to the path early in the morning because she has to get to school in the city. That's kind of like the arrangement we have. I like doing it, but so my routine, I drop her off and then I take my dog to this park that's by this coffee shop I like in Jersey City called Mod Cup. Get a coffee, walk her, come back to the apartment, get ready to go to Jets or whatever. So it's kind of the routine I got going.
That's that's good. It's good to have a teacher involved to make you get up. Especially when you work like at home, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing otherwise things get away from you. But my coffee will be the reward for finishing off this pod.
So she understands, she kind of gets my job to a degree now, but I do wonder, like when we were early dating where she had this normal schedule, she has all the stress at work. It's not like I don't, like there's definitely a level of stress covering the Jets, especially days like yesterday or Wednesday where the Jets don't even start until 12:30. Like the day didn't even start until 12:30, so I just have all morning basically to like do whatever I want. It's a very like weird schedule and life that I live as a sports writer, especially like people in any sports writer will tell you this, like people in their lives don't really like understand how things, like when we go home, like we're not necessarily done working, like it might come in any time, or like the time of the year kind of dependent on how busy we are. We might be busy every day or have nothing to do. Like it's a very weird life, and my family still does not really understand it, frankly.
And you could be out doing something fun and suddenly have to work on the fly on your phone or whatever.
I have a lot of stories like that.
Yeah. There's definitely plenty of pros and some cons as well. Taylor Delgado is here. He has commented in the comment section. Can we all agree this is too early for a podcast? I think we can, Taylor, but it was now or never. So we're getting it in, and hopefully the chat gets going. If you haven't dropped us a 5-star review on Apple, do it. We're running out of time before we read some of the best ones before the end of the year. It's the holiday season push for 5-star reviews. Thanks for playing along with us on that. We are going to get to Zach Wilson, AFC Player of the Week, Zach Wilson, and talk about the possibilities, the comments about if he could be traded at the end of the season. We're going to talk about Jeff Ulbrich. Zach has a great feature out on The Athletic, just dropped this morning on Jeff Ulbrich. His value, the fact that he could be a head coach, and a lot of that stuff. We'll get you ready for the Dolphins as well and do our picks. But before we get to all of that, because it is Friday morning and because the Thursday night football game went off the rails and kind of relates to some of this stuff, I thought we could start there, Zach. The Chargers lose to the Raiders 63-21. It was 42-0 at halftime. These are two teams that beat the Jets. That many points were not scored in either of those games because of Jeff Ulbrich and this Jets great defense. But when you look at this game from a coaching standpoint, it's really fascinating. The Raiders were obviously, lost early in the season, adrift with Josh McDaniels. They fire him. Antonio Pierce gets the job as the interim coach. Wins that first game. They're smoking cigars in the locker room, all of that. There's been some up and downs, but he has them locked in. And then on the other side, more of what I think we should get into, right, is Brandon Staley. The Chargers are done. And it seems like he's done too.
It's kind of crazy because I mean, number one, like there's so many like takeaways to have from this. Like the ones that are running to my head, like number one, like I feel like Herbert's almost underappreciated what like the kind of dreck he was dealing with around him, like talent wise. If you look at how bad they are, I mean, Easton Stick, which is an elite name, is not an NFL quarterback probably, and so like you see what Herbert was even able to get them in, like kind of in playoff contention this year, says a lot about what Herbert can do. But that for years it always felt like they had a great roster and they would fall short every year. That was like the Chargers tradition. This is like the first time it feels like they don't even have like anybody, like who's like a core player you can count on being with them for a long time. Like Herbert, yeah, maybe like Rashawn Slater. But like a lot of these other guys are either aging or injury prone or are injured right now or overpaid. And it's Keenan Allen's very good, but he's probably getting older too.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately to circle back, like the GM has done a terrible job of building the roster. And then it's like, we've talked a lot about on here about as the Jets were being really bad, if the locker room it was sticking together, how Saleh could keep it together, especially with the offense playing as bad as it was. I think you saw in this game what it looks like when the locker room is falling apart or is not like behind the head coach. Like, because you don't go out on Thursday night in front of the entire world and have put an effort like that. Like, it wasn't just that they were outmanned. Like, there was low effort. Like, if you look at some of those interceptions, the 320-pound defensive tackle running for the touchdown, like nobody was running after him. Like, it was just like there's no energy. It didn't seem like they were prepared. Like, Brandon Staley could say what he wanted in these press conferences. And shout out to Daniel Popper, who was like grilling him and wrote a great column this morning about how everybody needs to go. Like, I guess to tie it back to the Jets, like it could always be worse. Like the Chargers are in a much worse spot than the Jets are. The Jets have an elite defense. They have Garrett Wilson. They have Breece Hall. They have Aaron Rodgers coming back at some point, whether it's this year or next year. Like they have reasons for optimism where I don't know that the Chargers have any. And I'm curious, like they're always like bandied about as like, okay, any coach is going to try and angle to get to the Chargers because they have Justin Herbert. But as great as it is to have a great quarterback, they don't have anything around him. Like, so is this as appealing of a job as like we all thought it was? Like, I don't know. And there's going to be a new GM. Like maybe if Belichick wanted to leave and he could be the GM for the Chargers, which I don't know if a team wants to give
that's not going
to GM duties. Yeah. Yeah, that won't help either. But it's a very interesting spot because I feel like every year you go into a season thinking the Chargers are going to be good. There was probably less hype around them this year, but they always had like the talent and they always fell short. But now they just don't have the talent and they're worse than ever. So it's interesting. Staley's an interesting one because he was kind of like a wonderkind with Sean McVay. He probably got a head coaching job sooner than he should have, I would say. It seems like he's more.
That was when anybody with a connection to McVay was.
Yeah, it was like the joke is I had a cup of coffee with him, so I became a head coach.
Yeah.
But he seems like one of those guys that was more of an X's and O's guy than a leader, is my impression. And he can bounce back, and I don't think he's a bad coach necessarily. I don't think he's a great coach either. So I'm curious to see what happens with him. I'm sure he'll become a DC for somebody and do pretty well with that. Some guys are meant to be DCs and not head coaches. I think you've seen that a lot. And yeah, it just feels like that's going to be we knew it was kind of going to be an opening early in the season, but it's might be an opening in the very near future, I'd say.
I mean, yeah, I think we're on watch at this point as far as Staley goes. That's a great transition, though, as far as defensive coordinators who make great coaches versus defensive coordinators who are just great defensive coordinators. And you have the story out about Jeff Ulbrich. And I think there's a lot of little nuggets in that story that lean towards Jeff Ulbrich being a guy who could be a great head coach and not just the defensive coordinator. So let's get into it a little bit. I'll start here, though. Great coach, terrible taste in beer. Like you're.
I don't know.
You don't know? Bud Light Lime.
I'd say I remember when Bud Light Limes came out. I was in college then, and right after college, I remember just loving them. They're like, it's not like an expensive craft beer, and they got a little lime in there.
It's a step up from Zima.
Step up from Keystone Light. And so I don't know. It's just kind of, they're football players, and like my whole like lead was like Jeff Ulbrich like in a meeting was like, right now it'd just be great to have a fucking beer, like, and then they would like they all went around the room saying what they wanted, and then him and Tequila Spikes were like, I kind of want a Bud Light Lime, and they like knew exactly how they liked it, and then when they had an off night, the linebackers would go find a restaurant that had them, and it was just like a bonding thing. And I kind of like it being such a niche like beer like that kind of like makes the story like that anecdote kind of like sing. I feel like so it was just like. Yeah, we just wanted to go and get even just a regular Bud Light. Like I don't think that doesn't really resonate as much with me. So as soon as Spike started like saying the story, and then I brought it up to Patrick Willis, and he started laughing. He's like, yeah, it did make him the story, but he said they wound up at like Hooters a lot because it seemed like they always had them.
And they make the bartender put it in the back of the fridge to get it just to the right temperature.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that I use that as a lead because that like became. For him and Spikes, like Spikes told me the story about mean, just like generally about how like he didn't have like a wife and kids when he was in the NFL, at least at that point of his career. Jeff Ulbrich had, if not all of his kids, at least one or two of them, and he was married. And Jeff like would tell anybody who would listen how important it was to like give as much effort in your home life as you do. Like if you give 70% of it didn't, this specific quote didn't make it in, but he told Spikes, he's like, if you'd give 70% of the effort that you give as a player to your home life, to your family, then when you get out of the NFL, you will not be broke and divorced like a lot of guys wind up being in this league. Like if you devote all that energy and so like Spikes would be having a tough day. You know, he was a very high energy, intense player. If you remember Takeo Spikes,
yeah.
And Ulbrich would see that, he'd be like, Takeo, he'd say, Spikes, we're gonna go get a beer. We're not gonna talk about football. And so that was like the connection he made. He like made connections with guys throughout his journey, and I think that's the biggest thing that stuck out to me writing the story.
Yeah, and he, you know, later in his career, when Spikes arrived, he, you know, was at the end of his career. Spikes was basically brought in to replace him, and he embraced him. And he at that point, he was kind of a coach on the field for those Niners teams. 10 years with the same organization, pretty impressive. One of the other things that stood out, and you talked to Scott Pioli, obviously, you know, great front office guy in the NFL, and he talked about Jeff Ulbrich, the talent evaluator. And that's one of the things where you start to think like head coach too, not just like the connection with players, but this is a guy that has an eye for actually gauging talent. He's not just drawing up the X's and O's and making the talent he has work, but he knows what is good. And that's throughout his career.
And Pioli has said he's one of the best talent evaluators in terms of like coaches that he's like worked with, which is high praise. I think Pioli worked for Belichick and that staff. So
that the first run of Super Bowls, Pioli was.
Yeah, totally. But I think it's the combo of being a great talent evaluator and a developer of talent is like the biggest like praise you can give a guy trying to become a head coach, on top of like being able to stand in front of a room and lead a group of men and like get them to really get going. Like if you look at how the Jets defense has played, in spite of how bad the offense has been, like we talk over and over again about how like they easily could have folded by now. They've had a couple of bad games, but mostly they've been great. They had maybe their best game against the Texans since last year. They ranked at or near the top in like pretty much every notable stat. And obviously Robert Saleh deserves some credit for that. Like he like came here, brought his scheme, but he handed the keys to Jeff Ulbrich for a reason. And so Ulbrich runs that defense. He's the defensive coordinator. He calls the plays. He makes the decisions. Like things like that Eagles game, which is the one I highlighted in here, where without Sauce Gardner, without DJ Reed, you have to play Bryce Hall, you have to play Craig James, you have to play what's the guy's name? Tay Hayes. You have to play, you know, he's moving guys around. Like he came up with a game plan to shut down one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And he's gotten a lot. I think at the beginning of his time with the Jets, fans would get frustrated because he wouldn't adjust. He would just stay with what the Jets were doing. You've seen him like throw blitzes into the mix every now and then at the right exact perfect time. And they've shut down quarterbacks. And I just, he's gotten better and better as he's gotten more experience. And so that's why I do think he's ready for the next step. And I talked to a bunch of Jets guys in the locker room too. It's all in the story. So I don't know if he'll get the opportunity. A lot of times you don't really get it the first try. Like it's pretty rare for that to happen. It's because he hasn't even been interviewed yet. But I would be surprised if he didn't at least get some interviews this offseason.
Yeah, and Dan Botter saying, I really hope they can keep him for one more season at least, so they can run it back with this defense, which is a great point. You love guys to succeed and get that opportunity, but you also, as frustrating as this season has been as a Jets fan, like, man, one more year with everything intact and without Aaron Rodgers injured would certainly be nice. Back to Staley and what we were talking about at the top of the show at the Chargers. Obviously, Robert Saleh deserves credit for keeping this Jets team together. I think it was proof last weekend that nobody in that locker room has quit on this team. They were rallying around Zach Wilson in his return. The defense just continues to turn up. But I think Ulbrich probably deserves just as much credit as Saleh, because if someone was going to quit on this team, it would be the defense, right? That was frustrated. The offense didn't really matter. I mean, they've been so bad that whether or not they quit, probably you wouldn't even notice. But defensively, he's the one with those guys day in and day out, and he's kept them focused despite, I mean, the conversations they must have behind closed doors. I mean, I would imagine about, what's going on the other side of the ball. And man, if we give up one touchdown, we lose the game. And he somehow has kind of batted all that down and kept this defense razor focused.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we talk about, like, imagine what the record would be if their offense could score any points. On the flip side of that, imagine what the record would be if Jeff Ulbrich hasn't kept the defense afloat. Like, and I think we talked about earlier in the week, they've had good luck with injuries again. But like the fact, like, if the defense wasn't one of the top 5 defenses in the league, they might not be 5-8 right now. Like, think about that. So, he deserves a lot of the credit. And again, if this is a Jets team that finishes, 6-11, 7-10, whatever it is, like it's not often that I feel like losing teams lose coordinators to become head coaches either. But I think it's pretty clear, like, their Jets struggles are not the fault of the defensive side of the ball. And I was asked on Twitter, it might have been Boy Green, like, who would replace him hypothetically if he left. And I think the 2 obvious candidates are Tony Oden, who so there we go. Taylor Delgado asked it too. I think Tony Oden is an obvious one. Though I think he's especially good just in that role as the defensive backs or cornerbacks coach. Marquand Manuel is the one that I have my eye on. I think he's a guy who's been a defensive coordinator before. He's a great leader. I actually heard that he made a speech to the team on Saturday that really resonated, like before the Texans game. And then they went out and played the way they did. He only coaches safety, so like we don't talk to him. So we get to talk to position coaches like every couple of weeks. We have to put in requests, and he only has like 3 players in his room, so it's hard for us to like. If any week, maybe this week, to talk about Ashton Davis, I guess. But I was working on this story, so I didn't really get to request him. But yeah, he's a very impressive guy. If you talk to him, he kind of just like sounds like a guy who can lead a team. So I'd keep my eye on Marquand Manuel if Jeff Ulbrich were to leave, which I'm not saying I think he's going to. I think he deserves to get a job, but I'm not ready to predict that he will yet.
Yeah, this may be the year that, like you said, he goes through the interview process, hopefully with a couple teams, but he doesn't quite get there. And then that kind of lines guys up usually for the next round to be better prepared. All right, before we move on, we need to take a quick break to talk about our sponsor, Omaha Steaks. Zach, I know you are excited, and now is the season to gift Omaha Steaks. Great time of year. The holidays are here. Let Omaha Steaks take the guesswork out of gifting. Shop carefully curated gift packages that are guaranteed to make spirits bright all winter long. Go to omahasteaks.com and save 50% off site-wide. Plus, if you use the promo code WAIT at checkout, get an additional $30 off. Send tender, juicy, butcher's cut filet mignons, mouth-watering burgers, gourmet jumbo franks, or even easy-to-prepare meals that are ready in a flash. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless. And obviously, we're running out of time here. The holidays are upon us. So order soon. Use the code WAIT for that extra $30 off. Zach, last time we talked, you had cooked up a good amount of this stuff. I'm saving it for 2024, by the way. I'm excited for January. I've just been too busy to put the proper effort into cooking something that's good. But since then, you've had the bacon wrap fillets, right?
Yeah, I did. I got to eat them to myself because my girlfriend does not like bacon, which don't hold that against her too much. But they, I seared them up and then I roasted them in the oven and I pulled them out and they were just like so juicy and flavorful. And the last time we talked about this, I hyped up the sirloin, which I thought was phenomenal. I've had their steak burgers, which are really thick. And the scalloped potatoes. So they sent us this like gift pack that had like all these different things in it. And I've been nibbling away at it because I'm trying to savor it while I can, and then I'll probably order another thing when I'm done it because I think the quality of their product is just top notch, and I've enjoyed every single thing I've had so far. They also have the apple tartlets for like dessert in there too. Easy to make. They have all the recipes online. If you look, like if you don't really know how to go about doing this, they recommend like how you can do it. But yeah, I even like. When you freeze something, especially like steaks, sometimes the flavor goes away a little bit, but nothing has been lost on these, I would say. So I've really enjoyed the Omaha Steaks box that they sent us, and I'm going to keep getting some stuff from them.
Yeah, every steak, you mentioned it, every steak, every entree, flash frozen, vacuum sealed, and it's ready when you are. Also, all backed, unconditional, 100% money back guarantee. And there's always those people on your list that you can't find the right gift for. And it's getting close to the time and it's a week away from from Christmas or whenever you're getting gifts for, and it's time to get something, this is the thing. Just go to Omaha Steaks. Even if the steaks don't arrive in time, they'll obviously have the opportunity. You throw it in the gift card and you're ready to go. The most wonderful time of the year can also be the most stressful, but you can be a gifting expert with a little help from the guaranteed perfection of Omaha Steaks. So skip the guesswork, give something convenient, thoughtful, and guaranteed to put a smile on their face when you send them a gourmet gift from Omaha Steaks. For a limited time, get 50% off site-wide, plus that extra $30 off if you use the promo code WAIT. Every purchase backed, money-back guarantee. Simply go to omahasteaks.com and achieve the gift of greatness today. All right, back to the Jets and back to Zach Wilson. Not only is Zach Wilson the AFC Offensive Player of the Week, but the fact that Tommy DeVito is the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. This was a special weekend in the NFL with those two taking those awards.
I think that the NFL clearly was just like capitalizing on Tommy DeVito mania because his numbers weren't even that good, frankly. I think he had like 100-something passing yards and 70 rushing yards. But they gotta keep the DeVito train going. Tommy Cutlets. Not to be a negative Nancy, I have or Debbie Downer, however you want to describe it. I've had a little bit enough of the Tommy DeVito thing. It's fun for Giants fans. Like, I'm not going to rain on their parade too much, but like that agent and all that stuff, like it's just
the agent's not real. There's no way the agent is real. I've decided that they're filming some sort of weird movie and he's a character in it.
Oh my God. Well, it does feel like this is going to make a movie someday. Because if you think about I think about that Invincible movie with Mark Wahlberg about Vince Papale. Like, this kind of feels like similar vibes, especially a guy from the area. And it's like everything that's happening, they've like fully, they were in the MetLife parking lot, like giving away chicken cutlets the other day before the game. Like, they've fully embraced it. I think his dad has been on some commercials on WFAN, like advertising a plumbing company or something. So they're like fully embracing this moment, like all the power to them. But I'm not a Giants fan, so I don't need to necessarily enjoy it as much, but it is going to be funny to me next year when Tommy DeVito returns, Daniel Jones is healthy, Daniel Jones starts, and anytime Daniel Jones makes a mistake, they're going to be calling for Tommy Cutlets, and it's going to be great.
On the other side, Zach Wilson did play. I think Zach Wilson was, worthy of the award considering what he did in that game. But also there's the talk now that the Jets have already told him that he could be traded at the end of the year. And we talked, Zach, about it, and we can say it again, right? The better he plays over the next month probably means he's more likely to be traded.
Yeah, I think in either direction, I feel pretty confident he's not going to be back next year. I just think both sides are ready for a mutual parting of the ways. But yeah, like if he plays like this or even close to it, like I almost feel like him playing that game and then Rodgers coming back would have been best case for him, because then he could sit on that and then teams would be like, ooh, maybe there's something here. And I think that's the ultimate thing. I was talking about it with Diana the other day. There's some teams in the league, or there's going to be teams in the league who see like the skills that he has and are going to be like, they just didn't know how to coach him. Like, we can untap his potential. You'd hope for his sake that he goes to a team that's great at developing quarterbacks, a team like the Chiefs, like the Eagles, blanking on other teams that are good at it, because there's a lot of bad quarterback play in the league right now.
The Dolphins now.
Yeah, the Dolphins. I mean, the Cowboys, like teams that have like done a good job of developing quarterbacks, where he can be a backup and not have a lot of the attention on him. I think that would be ideal. But if he keeps feeling like this, he might have a chance to compete for a starting job next year. And so these next 4 games are an audition tape for him. Like, that's what it is, especially as he plays better teams like the Dolphins this week. You have the Browns coming up. They have one of the league's best defenses. He's always struggled against the Patriots. Like, these are games that, Washington, he should be able to go off against. It would be disappointing if he didn't. But yeah, that's where we're at. Like, they're not going to make the playoffs. This is for Zach. This is just about proving that he deserves to be an NFL quarterback, which, for most of his career, he hadn't really proven that. So I think we've all always thought like the talent was there. He just wasn't able to put it together. He would get nervous or whatever it was. Like, the confidence wasn't there. The effort attitude that he played with this last week, he needs to bring that every week. And if he does that, he can be good. But we also, I think it's fair to say that when Zach has had good games, and there's been a few of them, the Chiefs game is the one this season, he's rarely had back-to-back good games. I don't think he has had back-to-back good games in his career so far. And so he has to prove that he can do this on a sustained level for multiple weeks. Because he was good last week, but if you only do it once every 4 games or whatever, then it doesn't really matter as much. So this is going to be a big week for him to show that it wasn't an aberration.
Yeah, and mindset-wise, last week, clearly, like you said, the effort attitude and, being thrown back in as the starter again. Now that he's proven himself, there's a mental thing there too, where you see how he handles that. And if he can have that same effort attitude again, or if he puts more pressure on himself because, I played well last week, thinking about my future, like maybe he's too careful the following week because of that. So plenty to see. You know what? I don't want to say we were dreading the final month of the Jets season the way it was headed with Tim Boyle or Trevor Siemian. I was dreading the final month of the Jets season. And Zach playing the way he did last week and being able to now take this next month and watch him, it's kind of like a spark. Like, I'm excited to see what he does, knowing that he's probably not back with the team, but we've been along for this ride for the last 2+ seasons of the Zach Wilson experience. And it's just going to, I think it's better to have him out there and see what happens over this last month, as opposed to what the plan was a couple weeks ago, which was Zach's not going to play again this year, and we're going to ride with Boyle and Siemian.
Yeah. I mean, it is, in retrospect, it does seem kind of crazy that they started Tim Boyle at all, but also who knows if Zach would be in this position if he wasn't benched again, frankly. He told teammates that, what do I have to lose? Am I going to get benched again? So what? I've been benched so many times at this point. So ultimately, being benched for Tim Boyle might have been, maybe he can thank Tim Boyle for motivating him to get to where he is now. I don't know.
When he makes his first Pro Bowl, he can bring Tim Boyle.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, we'll see. We need to, I always say, until you see it, you can't, it's hard to believe that it's going to happen. And we haven't seen him have sustained success yet. So he still has that to prove. But this last week definitely went a long way toward him rebuilding his image around the league, I would say.
Yeah, we will see how that goes. All right, so the Dolphins are up next. Obviously, a challenge for Zach Wilson, but more so, I think, a challenge for this defense that did a pretty good job, to be honest, against the Dolphins on the Black Friday disaster. And I was going to start by saying, and I think back on that game, and the Hail Mary pick six, 34-13, national TV audience, first Black Friday game ever in the NFL. It felt like rock bottom for this kind of Jets team, but then they had the next week. So it's almost like they hit rock bottom and then they took another step down before last week, obviously some kind of turnaround. But now they come back not far later, against this Dolphins team. And before Monday night, I kind of thought they had a chance in this game because the Dolphins were riding, a bit of a win streak, and there's always bumps in the road for every NFL team. The Dolphins losing Monday night, I don't know. It was like the wake up call that the Jets could have given them this week. They already got on Monday, and I don't think that bodes well for this game.
Yeah, I agree, and Mike McDaniel is one of the best play callers in the league, so it's going to be interesting to see that chess match between him and Ulbrich. But if you want to believe the Jets have a chance, I think there are 2 reasons for that. Number one is Tyreek Hill is not guaranteed to play, and even if he does, he is bagged up. Although if Tyreek Hill's playing, you imagine he's still going to be able to beat anybody that covers him. He's maybe the best player in the league right now. I think he's just so fun to watch. And the other thing is the Dolphins are likely going to be starting former Jet Jonathan Harrison at center, who signed with them 2 days ago and hasn't played an NFL game in 4 years. So Quinnen Williams should eat. If Quinnen Williams doesn't have a dominant game, I'd be surprised. And so if you can force some turnovers, get Tua rattled, keep them from getting the ball to Tyreek or Jalen Waddle, stop the running game. Raheem Mostert, I think, had 2 touchdowns against them. Then you have a chance of winning a low-scoring game. But yeah, I mean, I think the Dolphins are going to be highly motivated coming off that game. I think they see everybody talking great about Zach Wilson. I think that defense is going to try and rattle him a little bit. And so I'm very curious to see how this game goes. I do think the Jets can win. I think the line is a little high, frankly. We're going to talk about that when we do our picks. But I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but the Dolphins are a really good team and they're well coached, and so I don't know. We're going to really find out what the Jets are made of and what Zach Wilson is made of, because this is a real challenge. It's probably their hardest game on the rest of the schedule, honestly.
I was going through the box score from the last meeting, and they did a pretty good job against Tua. He had, they picked him off a couple times. It wasn't crazy yards, but the receivers did. Surprisingly, the receivers had big games. Hill and Waddle were both over 100 yards. I shouldn't say surprising; they're elite receivers, but when you're talking about, Sauce and Reed, you never expect to see two receivers going over 100 yards in a game, and they were able to do that. Yeah. And you mentioned the rushing yards, like combined, they were, I think over 150 yards on the ground. Overall, the yardage was 395 to 159. Late in the game, this game got away, and I think, it got away from them there too. But besides being able to do a little more defensively, with those injuries, how do you see Zach matching up this time when he didn't get to play in that game 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel better about him against the defense than Tim Boyle. Yes. I think that's clear. So I don't know. Like, if Zach plays like he did against the Texans, then I feel good about it. Like, I think the Dolphins have talented defensive players. They lost Jalen Phillips in that game, if you remember, and he was playing really well. I didn't watch Hard Knocks, but apparently that was a big part of that episode. As was Mike McDaniel making fun of Woody Johnson's chain, which made me laugh, I should say. That was a funny moment. But yeah, it just ultimately comes down to what version of Zach we're going to see. Like, if he's playing with confidence, if he's taking risks, if he's making the easy throws, then I do think they can beat the Dolphins. But we need to see him do it against a good defense and a good team, I should say. Not a great defense, but a solid defense. And we need to see him do it in a back-to-back game. So, Zach Wilson's the X factor, and he's going to be in every game he plays in for this team.
All right, I'm going to throw this in just because I don't like trolls. But Rain Regime says Zach feels better with Zach Wilson now, but before he hated him. First of all, hate's not a nice word, and we definitely didn't hate him. But being critical of his play when he was playing terribly, like historically bad, is perfectly fair. And then on the other side, seeing the next option play even worse, there's nothing wrong with then evaluating that and saying, like, no, Zach Wilson's the best option here.
Yep. I don't really have much to add to that, but yeah, I think just because Tim Boyle was worse doesn't mean benching Zach was the wrong move at the time. It was the right move at the time, and that's an important stipulation. And so I'll stand on that. We've talked about this enough, but yeah, that's
Dan Botter jumping in saying literally every Jet fan hated Zach then too. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that matchup? Should we jump into picks?
No, I think, like, matchup wise, there's not really a lot of, like, it's all the obvious stuff. It's like Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard going against Garrett Wilson. It's Breece Hall in the passing game. It's Quinnen Williams against the interior of that O-line. Like, it's a lot of the obvious ones that you would expect. And so, and it's Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed on Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. It's all the obvious matchups that, they won some of them and lost some of them last game. But yeah, I feel good about how the Jets match up, but it just comes down to Zach Wilson, I think.
We will see. All right, time for picks presented by BetMGM. Always appreciate BetMGM, and they supply the picks. And we're going to start with the standings. As we narrow things down, we still have one person in the lead. It's a new leader, though. KMCASAZZ. I don't know how to pronounce that. Has been at the top or near the top throughout the season. I think he's bounced up to the top a couple of times, but back there now. Won 1 week throughout the year. 107 for 192, 55.73%. Just edging out new Nijmegen Jets, who was the leader. And then there's a little gap here, Zach, down to ESS, which is 103. So it's become a 2-horse race in the picks.
Yeah.
And maybe over the next couple of weeks, we try to get both of those guys on if it stays that way.
Yeah, I like it.
About the competition down the stretch. All right, and let's get into this week's games. Last week, I failed to get the pick in on time, of course, as did you. That one went Vegas big way, 3.5 favorites by Las Vegas. That was one of those it rarely happens when you play sports bets that after like 5 minutes of a game, you're like, all right, well, I won that one.
Well, I looked on FanDuel like in the early fourth quarter, and it was Raiders minus 55.5, which I don't think I've ever seen an NFL game before.
All right, there are some fun matchups through the week. Minnesota Cincinnati is like the life support
Saturday
game where somehow both those teams are still alive for the playoffs despite terrible quarterbacking situations. Yeah. Although the Bengals,
Browning's been good,
getting good quarterback play. Big chance for Cleveland to improve to 9-5. We always like to mention them. But Baltimore, Jacksonville is interesting. The Bills seem to maybe have righted the ship a little bit through all the controversy. I'm sorry, Buffalo and Dallas. And Buffalo favored in that game, Zach, 2.5 against a Dallas team that has been rolling. It feels like Vegas is smart, and so I went with Buffalo.
Yeah. That's one of those games where you're like, why? Because if you remember, they had like the Cowboys favored at Philadelphia, and everybody was like, wait, what? And so the fact that this is the case now, like, is very confusing to me, but it does always seem to play out the way they predict it. So I did do Dallas plus 2.5 because I'm a sucker. But I'll say one game I had my eye on actually is the Lions-Broncos game, because those are two teams going in different directions, and it has the Broncos as 4.5-point underdogs, which is a decently sized number for a team that looks like there might be a playoff team, which is crazy to think about with how they looked against the Jets in week 5. Like, they looked bad. And everybody's making fun of Sean Payton back then. Everybody's quieted down with that.
I took Denver with them. It just feels like the 4.5 is a gift.
And I also took the Bucks plus 3.5 against the Packers. The Packers look really bad against the Giants. Maybe they'll bounce back. That NFC South, it just feels like it's going to be a different team leading the division every week. I thought the Giants line, as much as I don't think the Giants are very good, like, I don't think the Saints are very good either. So 6.5 seemed like a lot to me, even though it's in New Orleans. Tommy Cutlets against a good defense, but I think that the Giants can cover that line.
Yeah, I took the Giants as well.
I was to say we both took the Jets plus 9.5. I don't know if that's what you're about to say, but
I wasn't. But yes, Jets plus 9.5. It just seems like too many points with the way the team played last week. And it would have been, I don't know if the spread would have been the same if the Dolphins had won Monday night, but I think that would have been an easy one in that case. The only other game I had kind of circled was as an interesting game, Baltimore at Jacksonville. Jacksonville home underdog 3.5. Trevor Lawrence obviously played last week, but didn't play well.
Yeah.
Baltimore, they just keep winning in different ways, and it's always close. And I just feel like they're going to drop one at some point, and this seems like a good one to drop.
Yeah, that's why the Ravens, it feels like, are the AFC favorite, but it's all, like you said, it's like every week it seems like their games are like they like just win, but sometimes that's all you need if you just keep doing that over and over. They have a great quarterback and a great defense, but yeah, the AFC is so wide open and weird this year. Like, I don't feel great about really anybody. Like the Ravens, maybe. Like the Chiefs are a disaster right now. The Bills have been very up and down. The Dolphins have been up and down. Like, I don't feel like I can declare any of these teams like the absolute AFC favorite. Like, it could be a weird team that makes the Super Bowl this year, frankly.
Yeah, and it's more frustrating because what we thought
the Jets
were going to be this year, and everything is kind of opened up. And with the Rodgers injury, it just hasn't played out. But you just like you have those thoughts of what could have been in an AFC that is just flawed. And then the NFC is just
it'll be better next year too, because everybody will be coming back from these injuries and stuff. So
all the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So the AFC Super Bowl person, who knows? Like you said, it could be a wild upset, and who knows who gets there. And then the NFC, you just have like this 3-headed monster with the Niners, the Cowboys, and the Eagles, that you would assume one of them is going to get there and will be the favorite in the Super Bowl. That's what it feels like right now as we talk in mid-December.
It feels like the 49ers are the runaway favorite right now. That doesn't always pan out once the playoffs come, but Brock Purdy has been the one thing I'm fascinated by is MVP. Like, it feels like the weirdest MVP race ever, because it feels like right now it's probably between like Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, and Brock Purdy, which, like, saying that out loud seems kind of crazy. I mean, Tyreek Hill should be in there. I don't think he actually will be, but I think he should be a finalist. like if I was voting, I don't know. I don't know if I put him number one, but I think I might be between Dak and him right now. If I was guessing, I think Brock Purdy's very good, and he probably doesn't get enough credit. I don't think he's the reason why they're winning. Like, I don't think he's the most valuable player on the 49ers. So I don't know how he could be the most valuable player of the league. Lamar, he's like week to week. You never know what you're going to get, like passing wise, but he's the best player on maybe the best AFC team. But yeah, I think right now it's probably Dak Prescott just because the numbers are great. The Cowboys are dominating. And so I'm intrigued by Dak as the guy right now.
Have you talked like this? This just brings me up because Connor hates Mike McCarthy so much that I wonder how he's feeling about the Cowboys right now.
Well, he only tweets. He doesn't tweet about Mike McCarthy when he's doing well. That's Connor saying when he hates somebody, he waits. Like Russell, you haven't seen a Russell Wilson tweet from him in a while.
There you have it. All right, this has been fun. Enjoy the Dolphins game. I think it's going to be interesting just to see Zach and what comes out of following
another rainy game. Week. Another rainy game, by the way. It's going to be very rainy in Miami.
Yeah, and not too cold. And it did. Rainy. It didn't bother Zach though. Like, and he doesn't do the glove thing, but he was not bothered at all by the rain. So I don't know if Tua has rain issues or not, but maybe that plays into this thing a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're heading to Miami and not getting good weather. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, very disappointing. I'm leaving tonight. Actually, Samantha's coming with me. We're going early because we wanted to have. We planned this like months ago. We were like, it's gonna be a nice weekend in Miami. We'll go to the beach. We'll have some fun in the sun. And there's like a tropical storm or some crap going on right now. It's like the worst timing. Like December Miami trip is always the best idea.
Yeah. When the schedule comes out and you get Miami late,
we had it in January last year. It was perfect, but we'll make the best of it. But it is very disappointing that the weather sucks.
All right. Well, do what you can down there. I'm sure the writing will be great. If you haven't joined The Athletic, do it now. Go to theathletic.com/can't wait. Get that great story that Zach wrote today about Jeff Ulbrich and all the other great NFL content and NBA content, MLB, all the sports. We have the best writers and writing the best stuff in sports. So join us, theathletic.com/can't wait. And we will be back with you next week with a full recap of this Dolphins game, Monday or Tuesday. We'll figure it out as we go, depending on maybe Zach's travel plans. But we'll talk to everybody again soon. Thanks for joining us on the Can't Wait podcast.